Clerk, call the roll.
Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Tom Spencer from Tax Assessor's Office. We appreciate you doing that for us this morning, Tom. After the after the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we praise you as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We thank you for the many blessings you have given us. Heavenly Father, we lift up our hearts to you today. We ask for guidance and for strength. We're thankful for those who serve and put themselves in harm's way, the military, police, fire, sheriff. We're thankful for caregivers and all servants. We ask, as we go about our business today, we ask for your guidance and strength. For it's in Jesus Christ's holy name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Court members, we have two announcements as it relates to today's agenda. The first one is under proclamations, resolutions, and presentations. It'll be item 6A. We're going to ask that we hold that particular item. Also under purchasing, this is item 9G4. It's the RT Lawrence Corporation. We're going to ask that that particular item be held for 1 week also. Also like to remind the court that today at 2 o'clock we have an IT steering committee. I believe it's over in the Family Law Center. Thank you.
Court members, you have before you the regular minutes of our June 11th meeting.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Under our proclamations and resolutions, Commissioner Brooks, I believe you have some students here to recognize today.
We've got some very special guests here this morning. They're a part of the Fort Worth ISD Vital Link program, and they're hosted during this week by the firm of Linebarger, Goggin, Blair, and Sampson, LLP, ably represented this morning by Mr. Stephen Meeks. These young ladies today are getting real-world work experience, and they will spend the week at Linebarger getting to know about all things legal. The purpose of this program is to give the participants exposure to careers and to the real world of work so that they can decide for themselves what is a good fit for them career-wise and what is not. This morning, we've got some very accomplished young ladies, and I'd like to introduce them to you this morning. As I call your name, would you please stand? Paula Yanette is a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. Selena Galaviz, please remain standing, Paula, is a student at the Applied Learning Academy. Adriana Espinosa is a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. Andrea Garcia is a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. Deandra Newton is a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. Judge, I promise you I didn't do this on purpose.
It's a great institution.
And Mia Flores is a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. And I skipped Emma Chavez, who is also a student at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. With your permission, Your Honor, I'd like for the young ladies to come up here and take a picture with the court.
Y'all come on up.
Y'all come on up. And would their sponsors please stand as well? Adriana.
Nice about it. I was nice about it. It's based on them. Be careful.
Y'all shift a little bit towards us. Right.
Thank you. Your Honor, just as an interesting tidbit, Shannon Fletcher was a member of the very first Vital Link class that Fort Worth ISD put together.
Did you go to the Women's Academy? No. Commissioner Brooks, would you like to move that we receive and file?
Please, I would like to move to receive and file that information.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the congratulatory certificates. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Wynn, I believe you have a certificate of appreciation.
Yes, sir, Your Honor, and members of the court. We have the pleasure and the honor to welcome Mr. Victor Thomas Vandergriff here with us. Victor, would you mind please come toward the podium and judge? I think you have a very tight relationship with Victor for the past years involving transportation. So would you please read the certificate of appreciation into record?
I'll be glad to.
Thank you, sir.
Whereas upon graduating from Arlington High School, Victor Vandergriff attended the University of Southern California, I might add, without probably a whole lot of choice.
Yeah.
Receiving a degree from the School of Public Administration and Public Affairs and later a law degree from Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And whereas he works as an attorney specializing in business development and legislative issues, in addition to being involved as an owner, dealer, and executive manager in the automobile industry for more than 25 years. And whereas the Tarrant County Commissioners Court appointed Mr. Vandergriff to the North Texas Tollway Authority Board in 2007, where he served through January 2013, and was chairman of the board in 2010-2011. And whereas during his service on the NTTA board, he played an influential role in projects increasing the mobility of North Texas drivers, such as overseeing the conversion of the region's toll system into an all-electronic form of collection, the Sam Rayburn Tollway in Denton and Collin counties, the western extension of the President George Bush Turnpike in Grand Prairie and Irving, a key route to the Ranger Ballpark, by the way, and Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, the Chisholm Trail Parkway from Interstate 30 near downtown to US 67 in Cleburne, and most recently his partnership on the negotiations of the successful agreement between NTTA and the Texas Department of Transportation for the extension of State Highway 360 south of Interstate 20 to U.S. Highway 287. And whereas Mr. Vandegrift was recently appointed by Governor Rick Perry to the Texas Transportation Commission and continues his work as a dedicated public service, now therefore be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby honor and recognize Victor Vandegrift for his business, leadership, and service to the community, as well as his outstanding contributions to improving transportation in our area. In witness whereof, we've hereunto set our hands and cause the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 18th day of June, 2013.
And I move for its approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. And I know that you're glad to be off the NTTA because of the grief not only that you took from your father while he was alive, but you just knew he was going to come back and haunt you on the fact that you were on a toll authority board.
Well, I'm not sure. At times he had some of the same sort of frustrations with the Transportation Commission, particularly when it was the Highway Department, the predecessor agency. So I'm not sure he's still wondering about me even now, but I am really delighted. I'm honored. I appreciate it. It was a real highlight of my public service life in appointed positions to serve at NTTA, and we got a lot done. And really this Commissioners Court, and led by Judge Whitley, were pushing all the way to make sure we did get things done. It's ironic, I had hoped at one point to come in here and thank you earlier in the year for allowing me the privilege of serving for Tarrant County, and I was going to tell you at that point, but I got tied up so much in the legislature we just could never make it, that you need to always watch TxDOT and the commission and stay on top of them. I did not know that I was going to end up being appointed to the commission, so now you can still keep watching me.
We will sleep a lot easier knowing that you're on that commission as opposed to us just having to watch.
I understand. Well, I also know that I will continue to be driven hard by the leadership in Tarrant County to make sure that we get transportation solutions done for this region up here in North Texas. So I know we'll continue to deal with each other for several years to come. But again, thank you so much.
Victor, I just want to make a quick comment. First of all, I want to let you know that you honor me for being here. Of the short time that we have been working together, I have found a true friend. You are authentic. Your approach is common sense and very direct, to the point, objective-driven. That's exactly the way I like to work, and I really do appreciate you. And especially, I like the way that you helped the region in pursuing 360. You didn't take no for an answer. You continue to push the impossibility. And you did that. So I want to personally thank you for your work and for your friendship. And I know my fellow members of the court are expecting great things from you because I think for the first time, and I don't know about the historical phenomenon, but for the first time we have a TxDOT commissioner from Arlington, right? We have also a chairman of the board of the RTC, also from Arlington. And then we have an appointee on the NTTA board from Arlington as well. So I think all the stars are aligned for you to get I-30 and 360 done.
Translated, all the pressure is on to make sure we get that done.
And don't forget
377,
377, 287, and 199 as well. Why don't you come up here when we all
All right, thank you very much.
I know, I understand. Taking notes from the judge about that one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got a primary and a backup there, Commissioner Wynn, on those cameras?
Yes.
Both times.
One more. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have a resolution.
For Charles Swearingen, I would like to, we presented it last week, of the city of Hurst for his 48 years of public service to the city of Hurst. Commend him, and he had a very nice reception, and so I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda with the exception of the one item in purchasing that was noted earlier.
Move for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two additional items to bring to you this morning. The first one concerns our strategic planning process. We're requesting that the Court approve a proposal which was submitted by the Advisory Board Company to assist us in the strategic planning process. If you approve this proposal, then what we will do, we will develop a professional services contract with the company and bring that back for the Court's approval.
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. DK, just let me ask you just a couple of questions because they were both very good proposals.
They're both excellent proposals. You're correct.
The advisory board group, I noticed that they've got, as I understand it, they've got a strategic planning process, but then after that, there's another process that goes on, and I'm assuming that that part of it is not included in the 48.
That's correct. And
did they give us any kind of an estimate as to what they felt like the cost would be to carry that through?
they did not, we didn't ask for this, but they have some software also, and they're going to give us some licenses to use that software to see if we like it. We didn't say that we would accept that before we introduce any type of software into our systems. I've already asked Mr. Wetzel to take a look at this software to see if it's something that's a fit or we have a different method of doing that. But this proposal here is strictly for the initial strategic planning process, which is much more aggressive and much more detailed than any of our processes before, because as the court had indicated, you all wanted to involve more than just the court and senior staff in this. And so we structured it in that manner. So
that was another part, that was another question, because I wanted to be sure that in the plan that they were going to ultimately, they indicated that the plan was going to be about 10 to 12 pages. I wanted to be sure that it was going to include, I mean, the other group had said that their strategic plan, there'd be a draft plan, the goals, strategies, actions, specific time frames, responsibility assignments, and performance metrics. You're anticipating that the advisory board will do exactly the same thing, except that they'll just be, if we want them to help us track and to measure and to go through those specifics, they'll do that for an extra cost. But at least all of those things, as far as the performance matrix and the timelines and assignments, will all be a part of advisory group's plan.
That's correct. And in addition to that, they are going to help train staff to you know, we created this new ordinance or order from the court. It's our governing for results, and that's a much more in-depth approach to not only establishing scorecards, but also metrics that different departments or all departments will be asked to identify and then perform towards. And the advisory board is going to assist us in setting that process up. They're going to work with us, I believe, with two of the larger departments to help us understand how we would implement something like that. So it conforms to the ordinance that this court passed. I will tell you that both of these companies are excellent firms and could do the job. At staff level, we were persuaded because it appeared that the advisory board could help us meet some of the obligations that we're going to have through the governing for results.
Is the individual that's going to be the primary individual from the advisory board, is that Jack Steele?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I thought that it probably was. And then as far as the cost goes, they indicate that the travel expenses will be invoiced separately as incurred, but then they also list down there $6,000 for travel and expenses. Is that going to be the limit on the travel and expenses?
The entire cost is going to be capped at $48,000. It may be less than that, but travel is going to be included. You know, we've been experimenting with webcasts, and in fact, we did an interview the other day, 2 interviews, with a candidate for a different position from Oregon, and we used a webcast to save travel money, quite frankly, thousands of dollars of travel money and time. And so these are the type of techniques that, especially when it gets to the point of working with senior staff and understanding the processes and everything, it may not necessarily be that they'll be coming down here or we'll be going up there, but we'll use that type of technology. Our goal is to get this thing where it needs to be and also keep those expenses down as much as possible.
One last question. On page 5, where they talk about strategic planning off-site follow-ups, and it says the overall goal of this 2-day follow-up is to ensure that we finalize the strategy map, scorecard measures if desired, and prioritize initiative.
Right.
The if desired makes me wonder if that would be an extra cost.
No, it will not be an extra cost.
Okay.
It will not be an extra cost. And Judge, I might point out for you and the rest of the court, as with any type of consulting, we believe we have a framework in which we're going to do this activity. As we move forward with any project, there may be issues where we determine if we want to go stronger in one area or weaker in another area, that type of thing. All of those type of things will be brought back to you. And our goal is to keep the court fully informed. This is going to be a fairly lengthy process. It probably will take 8 to 10 to maybe 12 weeks to finally accomplish. But we want to make sure that the entire court is kept abreast of how we're going to move forward and how we are moving forward on this.
Thanks. Any other questions? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Madam Court, if we could go to item number 2, we're requesting that the court approve the submission of a technical support request to the Texas Indigent Defense Commission and sign a resolution for the purpose. This action is something that actually the Indigent Defense Commission has asked us to participate in. I know that Judge Whitley has been part of these discussions. Our goal is to enter into an agreement, get the funding, enter into an agreement with CUC TechShare. It deals with the assignment of attorneys for indigent defense. We're going to be or CUC through as a subcontractor. We'll be working with, I believe, 5 additional counties. Those being Collin, Brown, Uvalde, Tarrant,
Maybe Bell.
and
Bell is the county that actually had originally created the software. And one of the things that basically the Indigent Defense Commission has said is when they invest in a discretionary grant in computer software, then it's made available for anyone to be able to use. Well, what they found is that it can do that, but at the same time, when you've got a county that has got it, they oftentimes will not have the technical expertise to be able to help transition and implement that in other counties. And so Bell County had been given a grant for this particular project. It's been well received by Bell County, and other folks have looked at it and like what it does, but Bell County really doesn't have the expertise to go forward. So Jim Betke, who is executive director, approached Charles Gray at TechShare to say, could y'all look at this and see what you think would be the costs of basically being able to implement, keep it current, and be able to then turn around and provide it to other counties. And what the Indigent Defense Commission has said is we'll grant $150,000 just to look at what is the cost going to be to doing that. And we passed that last week at our Indigent Defense meeting, and so at this point in time, it was the feeling, at least at this point, of the commission, that this needed to go through a county offering to sponsor that, and that's why Tarrant County is the one doing that. Most of the work really will be done through TechShare and those folks down there. It'll be to evaluate this particular deal.
Judge, that other county was Victoria County.
Victoria, okay. So those are the 5 that are interested in basically participating in the software that was developed in Bell. And I will move its approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Just to comment on that particular item, once we receive notification that we did receive the funding, we'll be bringing you a contract that'll probably be on next week's agenda between Tarrant County and CUC to perform these duties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Glenn?
Good morning.
Morning.
I have 3 items for the court this morning. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion is second to receive and file personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The second item, we're asking the court to approve a waiver of terminal benefits for Constable Precinct 6 effective July 1st. The estimated impact to the general fund is approximately $11,000.
Move approval.
Second.
We had a lot of seconds and a motion. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our third and final item, we're asking the court to approve a revision to the table of organization to reclassify a project supervisor position for Precinct 2 effective June 19.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brewer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Public Health has one item for your approval this morning, and I want to especially thank Debbie Schneider and Marcia Gillespie from our shop for working so hard on the information that you have in front of you. They really wanted to make sure you had as much information as possible this morning. So we're seeking your approval, and we have staff here if you have questions, so we've got the content experts. We're seeking your approval of 4 of the 1115 waiver projects, Delivery System Reform Incentive Program projects, or DSRIP as we call them, for their budgets and the authorized positions.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beecham.
Your Honor, the members of the court, we have one item for your consideration this morning. That is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2013-076 for excess workers' compensation insurance for budget risk management. Our recommendation would be to award to McGriff, Siebels, and Williams and the Safety National Insurance Company with an estimated premium of $150,247. This has been taken to the Risk Management Board for prior approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any appointments today? Being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manies?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have several items for you this morning. The first one is entitled Strategic Transportation Activities. I'll start this and then just simply turn it over to the court for discussion. There's been discussions at the court level concerning Tarrant County's role as it relates to transportation. As we just heard with Mr. Vandergriff here, you know that we've been all involved in in various elements of transportation, from traditional county responsibilities to we passed the bond package. We've become actively involved in seeking additional funding for things such as toll roads and other free lane type roads. There's been some interest expressed for the county to analyze if there's a need for this court or the county as a whole to move forward even more aggressively or in a wider span in order that we can ensure that the transportation needs of the community are met. We've asked, or the court members asked, that we place this on the agenda for discussion as it relates to this particular topic, and we are now at the point where that it's up for discussion in court, and at the conclusion of this discussion, if you can give staff some direction.
Well, members of the court, I'm the newest member, obviously, and when it comes to transportation, I'm an amateur. But really, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the federal government is essentially paralyzed when it comes to funding the expansion as well as the redevelopment of our infrastructure. And we can easily observe the last state legislature to figure out that our state government is having a hard time coming up with a comprehensive solution to fund future transportation projects. But despite the lack of progress at the federal level and the state level, people continue to move into Texas, and particularly Tarrant County. And we are now at approximately 1.8 million. And within the next 10, 20 years, I have read multiple projections, including from the U.S. Census Bureau. We're looking at about approximately between 2.6 to 2.8 million within the next 2 decades. So the problem that is presenting to us as elected officials, how are we going to make sure that our economic vitality is grown along with the population? So I feel like, and I think that we're going to have to take a hard look at it by bringing in some sort of a consultant or some expert to help us analyze the various options that are available to us. I think we don't have a whole lot of options but take ownership of these challenges, and we do have the responsibility, and we owe it to the people of Tarrant County to make sure that they can make smooth trips from point A to point B, make sure that our growth continues in the future. And this is an item that I think is going to be quite complex, complicated, and I think we should talk about it and look at the various options and move quickly, because as you know, it took almost 40 years to get 360 to where it is today. So by having a conversation today, hopefully we can get the ball moving a whole lot faster than 40 years. And that is my comment. I hope that we can have a good, constructive discussion about that.
Well, I certainly agree with you that growth presents challenges. It presents challenges both in keeping up with our capital infrastructure, but it also presents challenges in keeping up with our human infrastructure. They are both of equal importance. And I am not one who is willing to let the federal and state governments off the hook because they've got tremendous and in some areas primary responsibility for these for helping to maintain these various pieces of infrastructure. What we have to do is be proactive and make sure that we are in a position to advocate for and to perhaps even catalyze to some degree, some small degree, with the available funds that we have, projects that are of benefit to Tarrant County and its citizens. So I would be in favor of any effort that gives us the ability to take the lead and to take into our own hands the ability to work with the federal and state governments and to help move these projects forward expeditiously. I don't think that that will happen if we don't take action on our own. I don't think it will happen if we just sit back. I think that we've got to be proactive and get after this thing.
I agree with both of you. I have probably been as involved with it as anybody up here on transportation issues, and I think what I've found out, probably bottom line, is that knowledgeable persistence is what it takes. It takes a long time to get any kind of project done. Nothing happens overnight. Andy, you mentioned 40 years on 360, but we haven't turned a shovel of dirt on that southern part yet. So
No, you still talk about it.
in a realistic world, you probably got another decade looking forward. But I think what we need the assistance and help in is defining exactly where our needs are in the entire county, defining those projects which need to be done, prioritizing them. Can't do all of them at one time, and not everybody's going to be first. Find out where the funding mechanisms are, whether those are state funding or federal funding or a combination of both, or the next item is partnerships and bringing partnerships in to help you with the funding, whether that be county funding, city, municipal funding, other private sector funding. There's so many different realms of funding that you can look at. And then probably the last thing is implementation and getting that project actually started. And I think to do all of that, we need help. I don't think any of us here, these are almost full-time jobs, really. But if you have somebody to help you coordinate them and help put them together, I think it makes these projects work a whole lot better. I know with Judge Whitley's many years of help when he was a commissioner, we've seen some pretty significant projects happen in the Northeast Quadrant. And that's because a whole lot of people worked a whole lot to make them happen. And that persistence factor was a big player in that. But another issue was we had a lot of population growth in that area. So something had to happen. And or we had to get out of this, So anyway, I totally agree that I think we need some help on the big picture and the direction we need to go, how to go there. So I support certainly moving toward that and working with whether it's a consultant, and that's probably what we need is some type of consultant to work with. And I think that another issue is that this doesn't happen in a year. This doesn't happen in 3 years. So whatever we're going to be doing, it's going to be a number of years involved to take these projects from where we are today, whether it's Highway 199, 377, north or south, 287, north or south. They both need help. 360, north or south. It can go on and on and on. So I-30 from Arlington into downtown. There's a lot of issues. And a lot of
I-35 along its entire length.
35, yeah. 35 from I-30 north is kind of in the process. I-35 south, there's been some improvements, but there needs to be more. So, okay.
Well, one additional thing is that we can't just be looking at highway solutions. We've got to look at regional rail and other ways of moving people. It can't just be a road building solution.
Correct.
You know, I certainly I agree that we've got to focus more on transportation. Mr. Johnson, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
Ditto to everything that's been said. I agree, we need to move forward.
I think
We need to get over in the west side of Tarrant County.
Well, I think that, you know, if you look at the map, you're right from a standpoint of the northwest and really the whole west side from probably from 377 on the south side all the way up to 35 as we circle around, because that's the area where I think we could experience the most growth over the next decade from that perspective.
And the Chisholm Trail Parkway is going to be phenomenally helpful.
It is going to help quite a bit.
In that car.
We've collaborated, I think, very well with our cities and with the other entities as we've kind of gone forward on this before. I think that if we're going to do this right, we're going to have to do it. I mean, as we sit and try to determine priorities, I think if we're not collaborating very closely with our cities, what we're going to find ourselves in is a situation where we will be pitting ourselves against potentially cities within the county. I agree. I think we need to sit down and maybe even as we go through this, if we talk about the cities within Tarrant County, as much as I know the RTC focuses on the region as a whole, from our perspective, I think we need to be very conscious of Johnson County and Parker County just because of what the development is occurring out there and how much of that development is really coming in here to work on a day-to-day basis. I'm very supportive. I think we do need to sit down and we need to hear our options. But I'm not altogether sure that when we sit down to hear those options that we shouldn't invite the other cities either through the mayor's council or through just some joint work sessions to be a part of that process and to hear that, because I believe that if we're going to do it with local dollars as a leverage, it's going to have to be something more than just county local dollars. I think the cities are going to have to commit to this also. And just as we committed to a major bond issue for transportation in our last bond election, I know Fort Worth has one coming up. I think Arlington, I'm not sure where they are, but we should be talking with all of these cities, and they should know what the priorities are. I mean, they should know in Azle and in Lake Worth and in some of those areas that if 199 is going to be an issue, are they going to set something aside to help us to leverage and to attract federal or state dollars? So I'm very much for setting up something to where, you know, what I'd like to see is us put on some workshops, give some various entities the opportunity to come in and tell us what options are, how we might go about trying to focus on this, rail and highway, but encourage some of the cities to be a part of this also, if not all, anybody who wants to be a part of it, not just some of the cities, but all of the cities who want to be a part of it, so that they can hear and hopefully go back to their constituents and say, this means we're going to have to put money aside for transportation for big projects to make this happen. So I think we're all on the same page as we go forward. And I do think we need to have somebody who's going to focus on this, and that's going to be their primary effort. That, you know, they're going to be constantly looking for project dollars. And I think that we have to be prepared that at times folks are going to say, well, golly, you're competing with, and then they're going to list somebody. I don't know whether they're going to list Dallas, or they're going to list RTC, or they're going to list a city within a city, or within the county, two cities within the county. But I think that we need to develop some sort of a process as we go through there to understand that and know that about the only way I think we're going to build projects or continue to build projects is if they're leveraged. TxDOT had indicated that in the past. They got away from that a little bit. But I do believe that as the dollars become more and more limited, the way we're going to attract those dollars is by leveraging them. We've done it with our $200 million that we've done, and I think we've done an excellent job. And I think we've really done better than a dollar for dollar deal. I think we're more up to three or
Getting very close to 3.
a 3 to 1. And when we start talking about if we can leverage some of the federal dollars in here, we're talking about a much higher leverage rate. And most of the time, we ended up putting in $2 for every $10 they put in. If we could up that a little bit, make it 3 or 4, then we may be able to compete for and beat a lot of other places and get those dollars in here. So I think we need to move forward with it and as quickly as possible and see what other cities, and I don't know whether we include Johnson Parker or Wise or not. I mean, I would say Denton too, but Denton is, I mean, they're very active in the RTC and in the main line of projects. So there's certainly nothing that says we can't include them too.
Anyone have an idea of the cost of a consultant or firm that could perform this?
I have been talking to a company called Dean International, and apparently Dean International has been involved in transportation projects throughout the nation and has been quite successful. I came across Dean International because I was trying to study up on 360, and it turned out that it was Dean International that got 360 built 40 years ago. That started it, that helped got that project going. And that was my opportunity to get to know them and met with them. I asked them to look into the possibility of working with Tarrant County to provide us with several enhanced options regarding funding transportation projects like 287, 377, 199, 360, and so forth. And he threw out a number of anywhere from 480 to 360 on an annual basis. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But then I also look at the return on investments as well. By expanding our access in Tarrant County, by making sure that people and business can move from point A to point B without congestion, that will produce a huge return in terms of economic vitality. So it's a tough decision to make. Like I said, this is a strategic direction that we are talking about here. We need to take our time to talk about the weaknesses as well as the threats, and we need to fully explore all the opportunities. But I really think that we, as a county, we're going to have to take ownership of some of the transportation challenges that we are facing, and I think we're going to have to operate upon several principles. First of all, it's going to have to be county-wide, not going to be project-driven in one specific precinct. We have to take a look at the entire county. Second, I think we have to work in collaboration with cities and other entities, especially TxDOT, NTTA, and RTC. And third, whatever project we take on, it has to be financially sustainable in the long run, because we don't want to get into any project that will be a drain on our financial resources. And I don't think our constituents would like that. So while we are very wide open to the various transportation modes, including rail, but we got to keep in mind that financial sustainability is vital as well. And lastly, regarding to your point, Judge, I think we need to collaborate with cities and so forth, but as a county, we need to establish a very clear and crystal vision for us, for what we want to see. And then we need to establish some sort of a priorities as a point of to begin the discussion with other cities. And I think in order to do that, first, we have to kind of set out a criteria that we can use to screen the various potential consultants and then bring in a viable one, and then let that company work with us and our transportation department to build that collaboration that is so important. Because GK, you have mentioned to me that we unfortunately don't have the resources to do what is needed to be done in this arena. Am I correct?
That's correct. You know, I think we have an excellent transportation department, but this is outside the realm of typical activities that we would become involved in. And rather than to employ several people to do this, I would suggest that we do, if this is the direction the court wants to go, the court needs to determine if you want to use a consultant, and if so, that would be my recommendation. And then we move forward with that type of expertise, because you are going to need someone or a group that is knowledgeable in this, and that may be one or different consultants, and someone who is visionary and who's done some of this work before. And we have a great department. We just don't have that level or that type of expertise in our department.
How are we going to describe the scope of work to potential consultants?
I think that if it's the direction of the court, and I seek your direction on this, we will work on the scope as a draft, because it's you gentlemen that are going to have to determine what that scope is, not staff. And once you agree upon that, then we can move forward as it relates to that.
One of the things that I think, and I go back to the collaboration and working with the cities, you know, before we go and spend $500,000 or $360,000 or whatever the sum might be, I think we have to identify what monies we have available to take and implement whatever plan they come forward with, and what our commitment would be. And I think it has to be in terms of millions and not hundreds of thousands of dollars when we actually start talking about developing projects and going forward with that. And personally, from my perspective, I think it's going to have to be something, whether it's either a bond issue, but it's got to be leveraged with the cities. And that's why, in going through this process, and maybe just saying, you know, we're going to come together and we're going to listen to folks tell us what they perceive to be our options. And, you know, there are a lot of folks out there. Dean and Associates, certainly, you know, Dean and Associates was key in Text 21. They've been key in the high-speed rail. They've been key in the transportation conference that we have every year. They have an excellent reputation. There are other entities, both here in Tarrant County and across the state, who I think also do this type of work. And I think if we said we are looking for potential solutions to the lack of funding coming from the feds and the state, and if we had the cities of this county also saying that they would all be willing to come together at a meeting where we would begin to explore what our options are, and then once we've heard some of those options, figure out how we talked when Bill Meadows was here, if you'll recall, a couple of weeks ago, about the funding, the whole process of funding, and the possibility of setting up some sort of a group that would look at funding inside of the county. I still think that may be a way to go, because I think that, just personally, I'm not sure that we're going to commit the dollars long term, and if we do, it's going to have to be through a bond election, that are going to be able to make all of these projects that we just talked about viable, without the cities, all-inclusive, you know, putting up a pretty high multiple of even that amount. You know, if we were to put up $200 million, you know, I'm going to venture to guess that we would still need another $600 or $800 million from the other local cities, even if we could leverage it 4 or 5 to 1 with the feds, because we're talking about probably close to, I would guess, $2.5 to $3.5 billion when you start talking about 287s, 377, 199, the Walsh Ranch, that whole area that's growing up over there, and any kind of a rail component into that process. So that's what concerns me about committing to a $300,000, $400,000 a year consultant fee without the cities standing up and saying, we want to partner with you in this deal. And, we can still, if they stand up and say, we want to partner, we can still say as a county, we want to, we'll pay for the consultants and we'll work that forward. Or we can say we'd like at least 50% of that to be paid for by some of the cities so they have a little skin in the game. Because without cities having the skin in the game, I'm not sure, regardless of what monies or what ideas or options we get, we're going to have the monies to front that and to be able to go forward. But I do think we need to move forward very rapidly on hearing what our options are.
I think the funding issue is always going to be the biggest issue you're going to run into. And to some extent, the COGS, the RTC controls, basically most of the funding coming from the federal government, and allocation of it, and we're under a 31%, 69% rule with the RTC on eastern region of the DFW area and the western region. We receive 31% of the dollars, and so that kind of puts us at somewhat of a disadvantage, and I don't know when a reallocation or we look at that.
It's looked at every 10 years with the census, but the one thing that I would...
Is it anything's changing?
I'm sure that it will, but understand that formula is based upon the Fort Worth District of TxDOT and the Dallas District, and the Dallas District of TxDOT includes Denton and Collin and Dallas County, all of which...
Right. No, I understand.
I don't know that I would see it getting a whole lot better than 3169.
So we're dependent on that funding. The federal government has got their reauthorization is called MAP 21, and I think that expires or runs out in about 16 months. I think it's September, October of next year. So they're going to go through another either extending that, which say only extended the safety loo 10 times, 12 times, some phenomenal number of times. And I would anticipate that's what will happen again. So, there's no telling when we'll get a new reauthorization, and it used to be a 6-year block of money would be allocated, and that hasn't happened in a while. So, we're getting 18 cents, I believe, from federal gas tax per gallon, and 20 cents from the state. So I don't see those numbers changing. But there's TIFIA loans, which we've been very successful on up here in our area, in utilizing TIFIA loans to get projects started, and they, come into place on many of our major projects. So it's my understanding that that's probably going to continue. So I think there's a lot of options. When you start looking at how many dollars were put out on our major projects, when you look at the DFW connector, how many local dollars went into that? I think very few local dollars went into that.
All of this recent construction has largely been a result of stimulus funding.
Exactly.
Federal stimulus
federal
funding.
funds.
Because we happen to have shovel-ready projects.
That's true with the connector and with Chisholm Trail. The North Tarrant Express was not there was not stimulus in that. You had out of the...
But a TIFIA loan.
Yeah.
So I think that there's going to be obviously some local involvement, county, city, but I think most of that is going to be getting the projects to the point where we can get the funding. It's not so much paying for the project, it's getting them to that point. Having the RTC bless them and advocates from Tarrant County promoting our projects, either through the state, through our congressional leaders. That's where we need the help. I don't think it's so much, I mean, we don't want to put a road in a city that doesn't want it, okay? If Arlington says, man, we like 360 like it is, we don't want it tolled, you know, we don't want this to happen, then we got to back out. Or, you know, we can't go there with their opposition. It's just not going to work. You're not going to find anybody that's going to put the money into a road where where people don't want it. TxDOT doesn't do that. So the luckiest guy in that deal is the next guy in line, who will then take that money and put it on one where people do want it to go. So I think you got to engage the cities, but I think until we know what the projects are and the priorities and have some idea of how the funding can come in, I think that's the point you talk to the cities about the money and what their commitment may be, because we could go to a city today, we can't tell them anything of what it may cost. Today, sure, they want to be our partner, they think, till they're told how much it's going to cost them. And, you know, when, let's say 199, you have a number of smaller cities up that way. Well, do you expect, you know, one of those cities, Lake Worth, to pay, you know, some exorbitant amount of money on 199 just because, you know, they got a whole lot of retail base, which they do, and they have a huge sales tax base, over the next 3 miles of road, which costs the same amount of money, but that city doesn't have any money, or doesn't have that retail base, right, or that tax base. So they both need the road to move people through their city, but they both don't have the same ability to write the check. So do you stop it at one city? I don't think so.
No.
I'm going to put Bill on the spot and ask you to come forward for a second. Because I mean, when it comes to actually getting is the key getting it to get it shovel ready, you got to have all the drawing, you got to have a lot of work done on it. More so than just saying, okay, we're going to make this our top priority, and any consultant for that matter going and saying, well, I've got funding, they're not going to get funding unless we've got.
That was our philosophy at TxDOT the last several years I was there, is have them ready for funding that may fall from the sky, is what was said. And I think on the connector project, a lot of that, the reasoning we got a bunch of that stimulus money was because it was there, and we weren't able to afford all of it. So the federal people were able to give us more. We're still, I don't think, have enough money to finish the whole thing, but we've gotten a large portion of it done.
But Bill, wasn't that, but that was a design build project.
Yes,
so
it
was
was
not, the entire design had not been paid for, had not been done.
That's correct, but we had gone through the process of the preliminaries and environmental. That's the key on a lot of these large projects in environmental. I mean, if you can get through the path environmental, that's a major hurdle.
So if the funds, let's say we set, you've heard the dialogue, so let's say we set a project that as a priority that the region is not necessarily ready to set as a priority, and maybe even TxDOT is a little reluctant to set as a priority. What do we do? I mean, do we go to TxDOT and say, look, we'll fund the environmental, we'll fund these types of things just so that we can have it ready in the case manna falls from heaven?
That, the environmental, and another thing that is very important is right-of-way. I mean, if you want to participate in right-of-way, advanced right-of-way, you know, as we get more development in the area, all these corridors are getting skinnier and skinnier by the day. And just having the foresight to go out there and get the right-of-way, you know.
Isn't there some, what are the downside of us acquiring right-of-way before we have federal monies allocated or state monies allocated? We can't get, we know we can't get reimbursed for that.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's advantage by us doing it is we can be ahead of the curve because you've got to have the environmental done a lot of times to acquire the right-of-way.
But we can acquire the so I want to be sure I understand this part of it, because we could go ahead and acquire right-of-way before environmental.
If you don't want to get reimbursed by the federal government.
If we don't want to get reimbursed by the federal government for the right-of-way. So that could be in a way, that's our guaranteeing that we've got a land reserved.
Incentive, yeah. And the word corridors, that's mainly in places where there's development going on to preserve the corridor. Because once it gets closed in, it gets the price that it goes sky high,
And then if
as
we end
y'all
up
know.
buying right-of-way that, because of environmental, we got a problem with, then we got land we're going to have to turn around and sell later on. In this environment, in this region, in this market, that's probably not a bad thing.
That's right.
Most of the time.
That's right.
Bill, is there such a thing as a right-of-way bank that we could establish to acquire these pieces of right-of-way and hold them until project funding, and then have that right-of-way bank then sell the right-of-way and get?
I'm not sure if I've ever heard that, Commissioner, but I think in these areas of higher development, it may be wise to have a plan as far as a road already going through there, because I think you can probably stand a better chance of having them dedicated or requiring people to dedicate the right-of-way when they do develop the adjacent properties, if you have a plan in place as opposed to saying, we may bring something through here.
So part of what we would do in this workshop would be to hear things like, okay, maybe an alternative at this point is maybe you don't have the money to do the whole thing. Maybe you don't even have the federal commitment. But if we were to take, for example, a $200 million bond thing and said, we're going to use that for right-of-way acquisition.
And prioritize our roadways and go at it that way, knowing that hopefully the first one that comes up will have the right-of-way, a lot of it in place, especially in the critical areas.
In a federal grant or in a state grant, we've just established that if we buy the right-of-way ahead of time, then we can't get reimbursed for it.
That's correct.
Many of the federal projects, many of the state projects require a match, sometimes 10 to 20% of that match. Is it likely in that situation that we would still be required to put up the 10 to 20% match? Or could the right-of-way contribution, even though we might not get, if it ended up being more than, we know we wouldn't get reimbursed anything, but is it at least at all likely that that could still count toward our match?
It hasn't in the past, because it's before the fact, as far as environmental being done.
Bill, let's talk about the environmental a moment. And you do the environmental, and then you can buy the right-of-way?
Yes. Okay. That's the process you've got to go through. Yeah.
I know that in the past, on environmentals and a number, the design issue, that you don't have to pay for sometimes. Again, we talk partnerships here.
That's right.
Where maybe county puts in a little money, a developer, major landowner puts in a little money, and you've got maybe 15-20% of the cost of that environmental study done. State will then stand there and fund the rest of it to move the project forward. And then you go from obviously the environmental to the planning stage and acquiring the right-of-way and those issues. When the environmental's done and approved, then you can buy that right-of-way and get reimbursed, correct? Typically?
That's correct. Yeah, if there's federal money on the project, yes.
And I don't disagree with that. I guess what I was thinking is that there are certain, sometimes it takes 3 to 4 years to get the environmental done. And if we know that we have developers or whomever that are interested in that and in giving that, there may still, though, be landowners who are not quite as generous. And therefore, if we could go ahead and purchase that instead of having to wait 4 or 5 years and the potential increase in that value.
Well, that and another way to get it, you got to go back to your partnership with your cities then. Cities can require dedication for that property to develop. And you can get that dedication for free, and you don't have to buy that right away. So if that property is going to develop, they can require them to set setbacks to the proper right of way, and it all gets given. That's what happened on 26 in Colleyville on a lot of that property.
Yeah, but I also remember somewhere along North Tarrant Express or North Tarrant Parkway that some of the cities weren't as willing to give as much right of way as others, and so we kind of went back and forth.
Yeah,
I think these are all things that we talk about and we hear as we explore the various options that we've talked about as to what we might do or the stages we might. I think these are the things that hopefully we would come out of with that, with some sort of a workshop, and that the cities would be there acknowledging that they need to be cooperative, so we don't have a city in the middle that says, no, I think I like 2-lane roads.
I think this is where a consultant is very important that can help coordinate all these pieces on this kind of, on this project.
The bottom line here is when it comes to transportation, we're operating in a very competitive environment. We are competing statewide and maybe even nationwide for a very, very, very small and finite amount of dollars. So as a result, we're going to have to shift gear a lot. I mean, traditionally, as a county, we have been focusing mainly on county roads. That's what we do, right? Okay. Now, we are talking about including highways and other modes of transportation, okay? I mean, in your opinion, Bill, what do we need to do from a retooling standpoint to make sure that we, in the future, let's say in the next 5 years, we obtain some of that resources and knowledge base and skill set that will allow us as a county to be more proactively aggressive in competing.
Well, I think we've already started that with the bond program because we've grown away from the county roads and helping with some of the metropolitan and other roadways, partnering with cities. And I think that's the first step is partnering, as y'all brought up. And
we've been partnering, for example. Okay, we talk about right-of-way.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about collaboration and partnerships, okay? My understanding is 360, through the help of the city of Mansfield, obtained all the right-of-way for 360 South a long time ago. Am I right?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think that
a large portion of it, yes.
A lot of the
was
right-of-way
done by
have
the
been
cities,
obtained
yes.
already, okay?
Commissioner Figgis did the same thing. I mean, up on the 114, the 170, a lot of that up there was dedicated right away. But there's, and that's what I'm saying. We can identify those where there'll be contributions. There are going to be holdouts. And quite honestly, sometimes it's just better to buy those holdouts and to move on and at least reserve that right away before it gets 3 or 4 times more expensive.
And to get back to your question is, I think moving forward with trying to get the cities together and come up with a plan to where everybody will be focused on certain roadways, prioritizing them, and that be how we go about helping out in that process as far as is getting everybody together and hopefully get a fairly good consensus of where we need to go priority-wise on certain roadways and where the need is. And we need to take the lead probably in that.
So we're going to have to provide some sort of a...
through a consultant or whatever.
So in terms of funding, it seems to me that the trend on a nationwide level and the statewide is through the monetization of highway infrastructure. Okay? So roads in Tarrant County, like 360 and other highways, in order to expand it, maintain it, and extend it in the future, it's going to have to be done through some sort of a tolling system, whether it's on a mileage base or through a gasoline tax or something. It's going to have to be done through that model, right? So somehow we're going to have to participate a whole lot more aggressively and proactively in that conversation as well. Because right now, if we're going to monetize the roadways in Tarrant County and then have a large chunk of that revenue being spread out throughout the state, to me that doesn't make sense. I think somehow we need to protect as much as possible of that revenue source and keep it local. So that would be a strategic direction that I'd like to explore as well.
With the policies that we have in place right now at the RTC, first off, if it's an NTTA project and the money stays with NTTA and they determine how to, send out that money, although right now they're strapped, they cannot borrow any more money, and so there's no funds for them to build any additional roads with, as is the point with 360. As it pertains to the state, I believe the policy still is that the money stays in the region where the money is raised. The RTC's policy is that 75% of it stays in the county where the road exists. The other 25% is spread out based upon toll tag usage, is the way that goes. So the majority of the funds, all the funds stay within the region. I think that what we're talking about, and along the lines of what you're saying, is if, and NTTA has been talked with about this, is that if we were to fund a project, we being the collective we as a court, we being the collective we as cities and county within Tarrant County, if we were to say we're going to build this road and we got sources of funds coming from every which place in yon, but we were the ones responsible for building it, NTTA would probably operate it. That'd be our selection, but it would certainly be the region's hope. But then that revenue might very well remain in Tarrant County with whatever this funding entity might end up looking like. But those are all questions, those are all things that I would hope that we would answer as we go forward in this trying to figure out what the best move forward is. I think as we've all said, I think the only way it's going to happen is if we're leveraging dollars. We may be able to attract more federal or more state dollars based upon the more we're willing to put up. That's not been proven to be the case with the state. I was pretty vehement in my screaming about the money, the $1.2 billion that they spent from Solana up to Hillsborough, where there was to expand 35, and there was no leveraging whatsoever. But there was politics, and so the other part we need to realize is that in everything we do, and I don't have to remind anybody on this court, politics are involved. And I think that will continue to be the case, but it makes it much more difficult to argue when TxDOT or the feds have someone willing to put up $2 or $3 more than what for every $10 than what someone else is willing to put up.
Yeah, and with Commissioner Vandegrift on the commission, that helps. Because
very much so.
There's a big chunk of money every year that goes to discretionary commissioner's discretionary money, and that's where a lot of that money comes from.
Commissioner Fickus rightly said that it's a divided formula, and that when people can still specially allocate, TxDOT can specially allocate, we can apply for and get projects. It goes into a reconciliation bank, but it goes into a reconciliation bank. Yes. As projects come, things will be moved around. But whatever what we're proposing is to draw down to get this, whoever we were to choose to draw down federal and state dollars, it's still going to go into that reconciliation bank.
I think one of the most important things to never forget is that nobody gets anything done if you don't go ask.
That's right.
If you don't ask, I can guarantee you that job ain't going to get done.
And it helps.
You can't
have
just
something
ask
in hand
once.
Too.
Huh? And you can't ask once.
You have to do it.
You got to stay on it and ask. But if you don't go ask, you're not going. Nothing's going to happen. So.
Yeah. I used to sell for a living in my previous life, and getting money for transportation is like selling all over again. You got to be very persistent, and you have to continue to beat down doors and maybe windows, and if you have to throw a few stones at it, that's what you do. I learned about that from these two very experienced senior members of the court here.
The
and
key
senior
seems to
meaning
be
experience, not age, okay?
The key seems to be mostly 40 years.
Right. So,
in all sincerity, when you look at it, 360, North Tarrant Express, Chisholm Parkway,
Golden Triangle.
40 years?
40 years is a key mark there, and so somebody's going to have to pick up the baton on some of these projects.
So,
I don't think many of us are going to be around 40 years from now.
Judge, what do you think if we ask our county administrator to move forward with the recruiting of a capable consultant? However, the court would like to do that. I mean, a professional service, we don't have to go out for bid, but like the judge suggested, we may have to screen 2 or 3 to make sure we get the best one available. And then perhaps at the same time, in parallel to the selection of a consultant, we can begin engaging our city partners within Tarrant County, engage in a structured dialogue about this strategic direction. Do you think those 2 things can take place at the same time?
I think, and I'd like to see them, but I would like to see the cities participate with us in the listening to options and in, if I'm not going to turn away their check if they should decide they want to be a part in this $300,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 a year expense. So I would like for them to feel like, they were at least somewhat included in that process and might be so inclined to help contribute to the funding of that process.
Do you want to include all the cities in this conversation, or how many cities do we have?
41.
41.
I don't know that we're going to include, I think we need to at least be collaborative from a standpoint of letting them know what we're doing, seeing what if any interest they have, and then if the interest is overwhelming, then try to channel this into some sort of a cooperative. Again, I go back to what we said to Meadows when he was here. Yes, we need to push it forward, and I think we need to keep it moving forward and not let it drag, but we don't have to be the only player at the table.
I agree.
I agree.
We ought to have the conversation with all 41 cities, but recognize, as Commissioner Fickus rightly pointed out, that not all cities have the same ability to step up and write a check.
We have a partner that we can bring into this, and that's Tarrant Regional Transportation Coalition, which is made up of every city in Tarrant County and some businesses.
And
But
some
not
other
every
counties.
city in Tarrant County is a dues-paying member.
That's a good point. That's a good way to go.
And not paying their dues or not making a decision not to be a member, I don't think they're going to, if they're not going to be a member of that organization, which costs little or nothing to be a member, we're talking a few $100s for some of the memberships for some of the smaller cities. I don't know that you spend a whole lot of time trying to convince them to come in with us. So, but that's a good organization to go to and use as your forum, but I don't know that that's the way you hire a consultant.
No.
Okay?
No.
I don't think that,
I agree
I don't
with
think
you
that
on
this
that.
is a 41-city group endeavor. I see this as something that if we're going to take control and assume that leadership role, then picking that consultant is our business.
I agree. We ought to pick the
I think we got some
consultant
major cities that have
and then
the ability.
convene a conversation.
There are other transportation organizations in the county other than TRTC. There's Metroport Cities, the group you've put together, Andy.
The Southeast
In
Tarrant
Southeast.
Transportation Partnership.
Tarrant County,
I-35 Coalition.
I-35 Coalition. So there are other groups that have the ability.
And there's an 820 something.
So personally, I think that's a better way to engage other people. But the bottom line is the guy that's writing the biggest check is going to make the decision on who we're going to hire. It's just because city A or city B doesn't like so and so, I don't know that needs to guide our decisions.
I think we have enough expertise to determine what is needed in a consultant. I think we can collaborate, pick up the phone, and talk to all cities to determine from their perspective what is needed in an effective consultant. And then we can utilize their information that they provide to us to formulate the scope of work which can be used for an RFP. That could be an approach that we can take that will allow us to be a little bit more in control of the recruitment process, but also obtain the collaboration that the judge is rightfully concerned with. We should talk to our city partners and obtain from their perspective what they think is important in terms of bringing in a consultant to help us with this strategic direction.
I think we can go forward. I think we're all on the same page. Good.
It's probably also important that the RTC and the COG not see us as threatening, but rather see us as partners in the process.
Well,
from the beginning.
Well, and we have talked about funding alternatives, and I think we have said this enough that we're going to have to look at it. Michael Morris has encouraged Dallas to also do some of the similar type things.
Good.
Collin County has done some. They did, but when they did it originally, they set it up as a total authority, which made everybody a little nervous. Mm-hmm. But I think they have actually acquired some right-of-way up in what they envision to be the eventual Loop 9 that goes all the way around. Basically, it really now moves outside of Tarrant County because of not moving forward quick enough, basically we don't have any, the corridors have narrowed too much with gas wells and everything else. So, I think all that's going on, but that's why I like the idea of possibly agreeing and reserving some right-of-way, buying some right-of-way so that things like 199 and some of those corridors can be preserved and we don't end up having a bunch of businesses go in there and then it costing us 10 times as much to preserve that.
I remember that 15 years ago, the southern leg of Loop 9 was 1187.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's nowhere in Tarrant County.
Right.
Well, Mr. Manius, do you know how to move forward?
Let me see if I can kind of bring this to some direction. What I understand that you want to do, we want to engage a services of a consultant. And in order to do that, we're going to need to develop a statement of work and we'll start that process. And obviously, you all will be the ones who will make the final determination. What we'd like to do is make that somewhat interactive. As we develop it, we'll give you a draft and come back. It shouldn't take that long. Once we do that, then the court can make a determination if you want to go out on an RFP or if you want to simply, if this is a professional services, if you've identified someone or some firm, then we can engage that firm. Is that the direction you're asking?
But I still want, I would like a sense from our partners, whether it be TRTC, Metroport, the I-35 Coalition, to talk about what we are doing and seek any input or that they have about this process as we go into it.
Okay.
Because, if they were to come back, which I don't think they will, but if they were to come back and say, we're really not interested in, we don't think we have any long-term dollars to commit to this project, then I think we have to step back and say, are we going to invest $400,000 to $500,000 a year when we don't have commitments from other partners in this area that are going forward with that? Because I don't believe that the county has the dollars individually to go forward with these priorities, and I don't want to pay $500,000 a year for them to tell us what we ought to do and when we know we can't do it. So I want some initial buy-in from these other groups, which include all of the major cities, and a lot of, everybody's offered to be is at least invited to be a part of the TRTC. And then and that also includes Johnson and Parker and Denton and Wise counties. That's just, again, my perspective.
Is that the consensus of the court? Okay, so then what we will do, we will start the statement of work process. You've got to have that. But at the same time, we run parallel tracks that will engage in conversations. I'm assuming that those conversations would be mainly the elected officials making those conversations. Staff will be there, and we can initiate some of those and just kind of start going down this path. But we'll start putting the statement of work together. We'll ask that it be interactive so that you guys can give us some direction. And then this is, and listening to your conversations today, this is not a lone conversation where we stop talking about it and then just go do something. We need to have a continuous conversation. This is a big thing. This is really a big thing.
And what I want to do is, as I talk with folks, I'm going to ask them to go back and view this discussion on our website so that they can get a sense of what we're talking about, instead of having to, try to go through that whole dialogue.
I think we have direction.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to move on? Okay.
I think so.
The next item that we want to talk about briefly, less than about 5 minutes, is the measurement of recidivism at the county level. So Les comes forward. Let me just make a few comments about this. Everyone knows who Les Smith is, but Les is an individual who has worked with his counterparts across the state and really delves into issues like this. And the reason we're doing this presentation today is because there have been statewide meetings now that deal with recidivism issues. And I think that they're developing a strategy under Les's leadership that may be something that will not only create evidence-based practices that we'll be able to use to lower our recidivism rate, but also to develop a coordinated approach that's statewide. And so I've asked Les to simply brief you all on this. We're not asking for any specific court action. We just simply want to make you aware of what's going on.
I was going to ask you, I had 30 minutes to go, but I was told differently. As GK pointed out, this was a featured agenda item at our last Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee meeting 2 weeks ago on June 4th, and it was presented by the Council of State Government. They addressed the measurement of recidivism at the county level. And actually, the reason I'm here is the Coordinating Committee voted to ask me to give you a short overview of the proposal. This is not the proposal, just basically what I want to explain to you, why we're addressing the topic, the problems, and the and what goals we intend to achieve. And a lot of the people in this room were at that meeting, and you may have already been briefed on it. But measurement recidivism at the county, you kind of wonder, why is there an interest in measuring recidivism at the county level? Because recidivism reduction is actually, you're reducing the repeat arrests that you have in your community. We lose that meaning sometime in that word recidivism. It's also considered the measure of success of your criminal justice system as a whole. How well are you doing in the criminal justice system? Because the bottom line is you want to reduce crime and victimization, and this is for the juvenile as well as the adult system. So you can use this metric anywhere you go. It depends on how you want to use that tool. For example, it could be used to measure and compare the effectiveness of sentencing practices. It can be used to evaluate the programs we have in our criminal justice system. And what I thought was interesting is the new component as we went into reentry and reintegration is it can help measure your community efforts. A good example is how much community support you have, and community support really does reduce crime. For example, Tarrant Cares is a good example. The reentry webpage with our resources with Cornerstone, and the countywide prevention program with the truancy. These all have the potential of adding support to your community, but we'd like to be able to measure that a little bit better so we can be more proactive. And last but not least, as Commissioner Johnson and I over the years worked on that jail population issues, and we can control our jail population also, all in that same vein. But on going into slide number 2, what's the problems with this? And this is one of the reasons that I'm here. As GK mentioned, we plan down in Sam Houston State University. We work with Tarrant, Dallas, Bear, Harris, and Travis counties. We sit in a round table and we go talk about jail population control issues and the effectiveness of our programs, and we compare. But when we sit there, we're constantly struggling to try to find a definition of recidivism. What is that? What is there? There's not a national standard. There's not a local standard. There's not a standard at the state level. And then the agencies use a variety of different types of definitions. For example, what is a rearrest? What is a reconviction? What is a return to incarceration? And in some cases, whether the crime the person committed and reconvicted for was even greater than the previous crime. So even though we have seen all these studies done, it's very difficult to compare apples to apples when you go off and try to compare how is Tarrant County doing to Harris County, how is Harris County to Bear County. And this is what I think is very valuable about this, is we're going to be able to have comparison data. What is the goal of what we're trying to achieve is actually get what we currently have in our system and compare it to the effectiveness of the programs and practices to other counties. Okay, if my recidivism is low and I have a high-risk population, let me tell you that we may be doing something good. And maybe Harris County wants to come over and visit us and see what we're doing in our reentry page or with Tarrant Cares, as an example. So I think that's the main focus. But the end result is being able to have a universally accepted definition of recidivism so we can compare, as we just said. We can mitigate the cost of reducing jail population. We can prevent rearrest. But the most important thing is we can get a baseline established that's never been done before. And what I liked about this is not my proposal. I'm giving you an overview of the proposal. What I liked about it is easily I can understand it. Recidivism is a difficult and complex topic. It's basically the number of people that are released and rearrested within a time period divided by the number of total people that were released. We have the data in our system right now. I can get it probably within the next 2 or 3 days. I can provide it, and the other counties can do the same, and we can get on establishing the baseline. That's the goal. Now, don't be alarmed with this flow chart, because I'm not going to go over it in detail. What this is the flow chart of the 30-page PowerPoint that was presented to our committee 2 weeks ago. The top part is I just added that feature to it, so this is the example of how the criminal justice system works: police, prosecution, courts, corrections. But the component that I'd like for you to take special attention to is how the study would work, and that little yellow arrow to the right. The Council of State Governments explained that they can assist each of the 5 counties developing comparison recidivism performance measures by conducting analysis of the data in and out of state by those persons released out of the criminal justice system from our county jail and probation prison for their agreed upon time period, as indicated, upon the consensus of the 5 major counties. We're not real sure about how we want to do this yet, so we're still studying that and still under review. But once we get this information, and we'll probably start with rearrest because it's the most easily accessible, and I may add that's what impacts your county jail, is the rearrests. It's not the reincarceration, just the rearrest. But we can get the benchmark, and that is the part I thought was intriguing, is you can use this information more as an EKG, starting off as a very high level. Then if you want to go in and find out who's doing what in the programs and compare your recidivism rates, then you can go ahead and begin that process. And the most important feature of this is the follow-up that's associated with it. Very few people do that. We did a study a few years ago with Dr. Alaraza, but we haven't followed up on that. We would like to follow up on that as a county to see how well we've done since we've implemented some of these programs.
Let's explain to me, year 1, 2013, is that year 2 and year 3, so that'd be 2014 and 15 versus 12 and 11?
Well, there's so many different ways of looking at it. I try to, but usually what happens is you get say a 2011 cohort, and what you do is you look at that for 3 years, okay? Or you can get a 2010 cohort for 12 and look at it for 2 years. And
Okay, so you're going to go back to 2011, begin it?
Yes, sir.
And then say?
What happened in 3 years.
In 3 years, okay.
And a lot of times what will happen is you just want to do that one metric, and that's not, that's not really, that's a good starting point.
Okay.
And then if you decide you want to do 2012, you do 2012 and 2013. But again, that'll be up to the court and up to the committee on what you want to do. Now, I mentioned the Council of State Governments, but the University of Texas at Dallas also has presented a proposal to our committee, and I haven't got that, but they're basically in the same ballpark, and they have an excellent group of people. This strategy has not been attempted at the local, state, or national level. No one. So we have an opportunity to be able to make pretty good impact on our criminal justice system just by going in this direction. As Dr. Fabello stated, this is probably going to be a metric to be used at the national level also. I didn't bring the proposal to you because it's currently being reviewed. We don't have commitments by the counties. This was the first time we've even formally briefed anybody, especially the court. So I would think it would take encouragement at the court level to get the other counties involved. But I think it's worth it. And again, the formal proposal would be brought forth back to the court when it would be developed. So if you have any questions, I will end the very brief presentation here. So do you have any questions?
I'd just like to say that I think this would be a useful tool, especially if we can get participation from other large counties, and I think you ought to pursue it to see if we can get there.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Thank you, Les.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one final comment on what Les was talking about, really the Criminal Justice Planning Committee, and that's something that we started, quite frankly, with Commissioner Johnson when we had our jail overcrowding. That committee continues to work. We meet monthly, and they're keeping abreast of what's happening in the justice system and in our jail operations and things such as that. So that's a committee of the courts, and it's in my opinion, it's doing a very good job. Finally, members of the court, we could go to item number C. This is the legislative issues, legislative update. Mr. Mendez is here to brief the court at this time.
Good morning. Just briefly, an overview of where we are right now. Sunday was the last day for the governor to veto or sign legislation from the regular session. He did veto 26 bills. Among them was the bill that we were concerned about last week, SB 1234, that dealt with truancy issues. So that one's off the table. We don't have to worry about that one anymore. Unfortunately, he did not veto the bill that we requested a veto for. That was the bill that dealt with ARV practices, and one that the CUC had identified as potentially encouraging frivolous litigation. So I guess we're going to have to watch that legislation over time and see how that impacts us. He signed 1,407 bills. He allowed another 14 bills to become law without his signature. And I think we're basically pretty pleased with what came out of the session. As far as the special session goes, there are, to remind you, the court, there were 4 issues that were on the call. Chief amongst those is the redistricting issue. The Senate did kick out on Friday all of the redistricting issues that dealt with the Senate, House, and congressional districts. Those bills are in the House currently, and this morning the committee kicked out the Senate bills, so they should be on the House floor for consideration at the end of this week. Additionally, the Senate kicked out the juvenile capital offenders issue, and that is being heard today in committee, so that looks like pretty much a slam dunk. So it looks like they will get to redistricting and the juvenile capital offenders issue. SJR 2, the transportation funding issue, is on the Senate floor today. They're probably hearing that right now. And as well as the handful of abortion bills that the governor did add to the call. As to whether or not those bills have enough momentum to get through the entire process, that remains to be seen. But it looks like they'll be working over the weekend to finish up what's on their plate. And that's where we are right now. Happy to answer any questions.
On redistricting, the Senate sent a bill to the House. It, I gather, just replicates what the federal court did in the interim.
That is my understanding. There were 3 bills that were sent over from the Senate. The House committee this morning approved all 3 of those bills and sent them to the floor.
That would have been House lines, Senate lines, and congressional lines.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
We have one other comment on this, Commissioner. When you raised an issue last week as it relates to Senate Bill 1611, which was the redaction issue on the open files of the District Attorney's Office, we have had a meeting with the District Attorney's Office, their Criminal Division, to talk about it, to determine the scope. There are some issues that need to be addressed. I know that through the efforts of our District Attorney's Office, through the prosecutor module that we're creating, that we are trying to, that we will incorporate into that software the ability to, or hopefully the ability to do a lot of that redaction, and also to catalog where the information is sent. These are some of the concerns that the DA's office has. I believe also, Mark, that the District and County Attorneys Association is going to be meeting, and I think this is going to be one of their discussion items later on this month or first part of next month. So we're moving on that upon your request.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
Okay, then we will recess our open meeting to adjourn to our closed session to discuss items exempted under sections 551.071, 072, 074, 06. Session, and there being no business to conduct at this time, we're adjourned.